Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builder Supply. In this video, we're going to make a lock for a thick wooden door is what the client's subject line reads. So the client has an unusually thick wood door, something they've built probably out of plywood or OSB or some sort of other sheet material, and then probably use 2x4 studs and things of that nature. Not uncommon. Application is where the client has a shed or a barn or some sort of structure that's used to store things, not to habitate in typically is where I'll see these types of doors. But they're doors that end up being expensive, but they end up also being easy to make. And you can be somewhat creative with how you go about doing that. I'll show you pictures of what the client's doing on the screen next. But the summary or the overview of what's happening is they've got an unusually thick door. I think it's 4 inch. So the question becomes is, how do you lock that door or do so elegantly? You know, you might say to yourself, well, I'm not going to spend any money. I'm going to put a padlock on it. Yep, that works. That will certainly lock the door. Other people will say, no, I'm not building that door to end up putting a padlock on it. So let's talk about what those options are. So let's say that this client's door is 4 inch thick and it's been about a week and a half since the order was placed, and I'm waiting for the parts to come in before I start the job. But I believe it's a 4 inch thick door. And I'll show you pictures of it. So when it comes to a thick door lock, occasionally I'll get a call or an email from a client or a live chat that they went on, bought a Quickset 400T Tylo or a Schlage B160 or an F series lock. And the client will say it's just unbelievable that they don't have thick door kits for these locks. And I'm thinking, how many 4 inch thick doors do you see in your life? One a decade? I'm in the business of seeing unusually thick doors and I rarely see them. So at the end of the day, there are not a lot of inexpensive options. There are expensive options. And the easiest and most robust is most certainly going to be a mortise lock. A mortise lock is going to be able to, depending on the maximum door thickness, and 4 inch does get there, get out to a point where you might have trouble with getting the spindles long enough. And this job is outside of the envelope of what's commercially available, and I'll explain. And that's the whole purpose of this video, what we're doing to make a lock for this door. When it comes to a mortise lock, you're going to need, in no particular order, and not necessarily all of these items, longer cylinders, longer thumb turn spindles, longer spindles for the lock, longer mounting bolts, longer mounting bolt posts, and extended lip strike. And all of that depends on whether it be left or right hand, meaning in swing, or left hand reverse, or right hand reverse, meaning outswing. So needing all of those components or a mixture of those is dependent on the door thickness, on the hand of the door, plus where in the center of the thickness of that door will you install it? Is it centered equally? Or is it extended equally? Or is it extended unequally? What side is it biased towards if it's not in the center? Outside or inside? That all really matters. If you've got a keyed lock, thumb turn on the inside and a key on the outside, and it's extended to the outside, let's say it's a 2 3/4 thick door, 1 inch extended to the outside. So you're going to put it where you would normally put it for a standard 1 3/4 thick door from the perspective of the inside of the door. So your thumb turn spindle length is okay, but now your cylinder needs to be about 1 inch longer. So if I took that same concept and reversed it and we extended it to the inside, well, now I need a longer thumb turn spindle and a standard cylinder. Extended lip strikes. Those are also fun as well in the sense of where is the lock centered? Do you need an extended lip? Is it in swing? Is it out swing? All of it really matters. And thick door options on mortise locks can either not impact the cost, meaning you have a door thickness up to a certain value. Let's just say 2.5 inch for Schlage. I just did a job with a very important client to us, a substantial woodworking company. And they've bought a couple of dozen 2.5 inch thick mortise locks extended unequally. Because of that 2.5 inch, it didn't affect the cost. If it was 2 5/8, the whole game would have changed because now we've got all these adders to the list price. So mortise locks are easy in the sense that you can do longer parts. Mortise locks are typical of that. If you do cylindrical locks, the issue is It's really hard to get your hands on. And by the way, that mortise lock I'm talking about, that's several hundreds of dollars. That is not a $200 lock. That is an $800 lock. When it comes to cylindrical locks, the options of doing it in knob trim are now extremely small. I think I've got a Falcon lock here. I think Falcon will still do grade 1 knob. The issue is you won't get grade 2, meaning heavy duty residential or standard duty commercial. It's always going to be heavy duty commercial. Uh, Knob locks are tricky availability wise for unusual door thicknesses. All the same rules apply with how it's extended, equally or unequally, and if unequally, to what side of the door. Levers you can do, your big door manufacturers, your big door hardware manufacturers, your Schlags and whatnot, they'll do lever trim, grade 1 extended locks. Again, several hundreds of dollars, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars for this stuff. And back to the mortise locks, those can get really expensive depending on the thickness. If Schlag's got to do an unusually long mortise cylinder, the list price ad is hundreds of dollars alone. So most clients don't go for $1,000 solution or more. It's been many years since a client ordered a $1,200 mortise lock for an unusual thick door for a residential homemade application. So what can you do? Well, I like the Kaba Ilko 45 series of deadbolts. They're just deadbolts. And what I like about that, and I'll show them to you, is that they're modular. You can thread the cylinders in. You can get any length cylinders you need. It's just a deadbolt, but it secures the door. And one thing that the cool kids are doing nowadays is that they're using a roller latch to keep the door in the closed position and just held there, and then a deadbolt. Accurate Hardware, Accurate Lock in Connecticut, they make mortise lock platforms that incorporate a roller latch and a deadbolt. And you can easily do that for thick doors because there's no trim. There's just cylinders and a thumb turn. And the thumb turn itself can be a mortise cylinder with a thumb turn on it. So that's really easy to do. The Kaba Ilko 45 series is easy to do because it's modular, meaning I can stick a 15/16 mortise cylinder in there and I can stick a 3-inch mortise cylinder in there. And I can build that really big. I've done those deadbolts for maybe 5-inch thick doors without any trouble. And about 5-inch might be my record for that type of lock. So not a big deal to do those. However, that's a bolt. It's not latching. It's not going to self-latch. This client really wanted to do the Yale 197. The 197 is a rim lock. It's a rim lock because it's mounted on the surface of the door around the perimeter of the door. So it's a surface mounted bolt. Doesn't latch, but it's what the client wanted. And I can't say why. It's just what he wanted. Okay, great. The issue is, in order to get in, you need a rim cylinder. The issue with the rim cylinder is the longest tailpiece isn't long enough to get all the way through the door. So the purpose of this video and the order that I've taken for the client is to weld the client a custom tailpiece. I'm going to take two, what Sargent calls connecting bars, cylinder bar. I would call it a tailpiece on the back of a rim cylinder. On the back of a mortise cylinder, I would call it a cam. That's a rim cylinder, so I'll call it a tailpiece. So I'm going to take two tailpieces, I'm going to weld them together, I'm going to cut it to the proper length, and I'm going to attach it to the back of the rim cylinder, and life's going to be great. So that's the purpose of this video. Part of this video is going to be, I'm going to show you the locks that I was talking about earlier, just a quick little dive into the mortise, the cylindrical, the Kaba, and then the Yale rim lock, the 197. I'm going to I'm going to do a whole thing on setting up the welder for this, step by step of how to set up a welder literally out of the box from scratch. Welding is a phenomenal skill. It doesn't take a lot of investment in time to learn. It takes a reasonable amount of investment in time to get good at it, but it's a good life skill to have. If you have the option of taking it as an adult and continuing education, which is how I learned how to weld. I was already out of college. Or if you know a young person who's in high school who offers a whose high school offers a metal shop. I have a nephew whose high school does, and he's absolutely signed up as a first year high school student because he may have heard me talking about, or I may have been talking to him about welding. I think he expressed interest in metal shops, and I went on to say how great of a skill it is to be able to weld because it's art. It's not shop work. It's art. It's really what it is. Um, so we're going to go over the welding setup. We're going to actually weld the tail pieces together. I plan on stress testing my weld to see if it's durable, probably make up a couple and see how much effort it takes to break them. We're going to make sure that it works. The key with welding a tail piece is that it must be, if my elbow to the tip of my finger is a laser beam, that axis that everything turns on must be laser beam straight. The tailpiece can't go in an oval fashion, otherwise it won't work in the lock because the lock has a plus sign in the back, a female shaped plus sign where the tailpiece will go in. If that's not perfectly straight, it lines inside of the prep of the lock. It won't turn it very well. So that'll be the crucial part of making sure that it's welded correctly. But when it comes to welding, you're talking about clamping the material down correctly, and you're talking about controlling how much heat you're throwing at it all at once. Too much heat and you really bend and warp everything or vaporize or burn the metal. Too little and you're not penetrating. And that's where the time investment comes in. And I am by no means the world's gift to welders, but I develop proficiency in it to the point where I'm confident that I'll be able to make a tailpiece for a client. It's either me make one or it's me order one from someone like Accurate. And I'm thinking, well, I've got a welder and I spent all that time learning how to do it. So why not just video it? So let's switch to the screen view. Let's take a look at what the client's dealing with first, and then the lock review work. Let's do that.
If you've not hit subscribe yet, we would very much appreciate if you did, and hopefully you're enjoying this video. Now, let's get back to it.
Let's look at what the client's building. What the client has here, I had said it was a 4-inch thick door. It's actually 4 1/4. That's what their tape measure shows reasonably well. And I'm not sure of exactly what these components are, but it looks like they've got some pine wainscot type material here, maybe some 1/2-inch plywood, maybe a 2x4. I don't really know, more plywood maybe, and then some pine 1x material out here is what it looks like. So regardless of what it's made of, it's 4 1/4 thick. Now, I had talked about why someone would want to make one of these doors. Well, all this you can get at the local home improvement store or at your lumber yard, or you may have it laying around and you're going to build a door. Great. I love the idea. People do it all the time. Now, the reason that people do it all the time is because they want to create a certain look. And then what happens is, well, here's the look. So that's neat what the client's done there. That's fun. Got character, charm. It's cool. He could have just put the boards on vertical or horizontal. He said, no, I'm going to do something fun with this. And he did. I don't know how he made all the cuts in the sense of what tool he would have used. Hard to say. At the end of the day, the client could have taken some material, laid all these boards down in 4 quadrants like that. I don't know. How would I have done that? Well, I would have used CNC because it looks like they've probably used a circular saw, so it's not perfect. Let's think about that for a minute. Maybe what I would have done was, assuming, I don't know if this is all T-slot material, I probably would have put all the boards together and let them hang randomly long. And I may have done this in just 4 quadrants. But I wouldn't have done, I probably would not have done what the client did here, even though it does certainly give a much neater look. I may have run boards all the way long and nailed them down to something and then just took a circular saw with a straight edge and went this way with it and then went that way with it. And I would have had an entire section of all the boards. I could have pulled the boards off from the brad nail that I would have used. You could also just determine, what angle is all this going to be at and just put that down to a sacrificial board and then slide it through a table saw. Or you could have just put them on a chop saw and just cut, 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 cut. That's what you could have done. Anyway, it gives a neat look. High quality polyurethane on here, gloss finish. So, but what inevitably ends up happening is someone spends all the time to build one of these really cool thick doors, and they are cool, I wonder if the inside looks the same as well. And they realize, wait a minute, I need to lock this door. Coming up with a 6-inch cabinet pull, that's no big deal. Cabinet, a drawer pull, that's no big whoop. But a lock is more of a challenge. And that's when my phone will ring, and I'm glad that it does. So I had just said we're going to take a tour through all of the lock options. So let's go through and take a tour of all the lock options now.
If you've not hit subscribe yet, we would very much appreciate if you did, and hopefully you're enjoying this video. Now, let's get back to it.
Okay, let's do a review of the locks I had mentioned earlier. Mortise locks, cylindrical locks, Kava 45 series, and then what the client ended up ordering, which was a Yale 197. So for mortise locks, let's look at Accurate, their catalog first, because I like how they lay out their mortise lock offering. It's a little more graphical than Schlage, is what I'm referring to. But we'll look at the Schlage price list for sure. So the Accurate mortise locks, it's their 9000 series, if I recall correctly. Yeah, perfect. Mortise lock. It's got a 8-inch by inch and a quarter, generally inch and a quarter, not always. Mortise cassette is what you're seeing here. You're seeing a mortise cassette with what's called the armor front. That decorative plate's the armor front. That's a different conversation. Don't get me started on why those exist. Accurate can do different back sets, but generally 2 3/4 for commercial is what you'll find. 2.5 is not uncommon in residential. You can see better, bigger back sets. There's an incredibly famous basketball player whose name rhymes with rack, tack, flack. His home, when he was playing for the Magic, was built, and I was in a class with a project manager for door hardware for that basketball player's home. All of the back sets on everything were 3 3/4 because his hands are so large. They needed to move those locks further away from the edge. 3 3/4 is also typical in hospitals because for the same reason, they want to get the hardware further off the edge of the door. Because generally, people that are in hospitals are going to be washing their hands constantly and are going to be opening doors with their elbows. So they push those locks further away. The point of the matter is the Mortise lock platform allows you to accommodate unusual door thicknesses because these are modular in their own sense. Now, what's not really obvious here is what you need to put a mortise lock together. But I'll tell you, they're actually quite simple once you've exposed yourself to them. See if we can, yeah, perfect. Absolutely perfect. I could have pulled up the parts manual as well. This is called the cassette. Use your imagination and you can see why they call it a cassette. Well, if you're probably 40 years or older. But when it comes to these mortise locks, they all are the same type of principle where you've got a cassette, you've got a spindle, sometimes you have a spring pack, you've got a cylinder. They're showing a cylinder here, but you could have a thumb turn on the other side. What they're not showing here is a strike plate. You need to have a strike plate. So when you have an unusual door thickness, what's going to change is the spindle, the mounting posts, the screws, the length of the mortise cylinder, the length of the spindle on the back of the thumb turn, if there is a thumb turn, and the lip of the strike plate. All of those are variables. Now, when it comes to mortise locks, they're extremely advantageous because the factory's already set up most of them. Well, not most of them. Schlage is set up really well to give you these components for unusual door thicknesses. Others, like Yale, don't make it so easy, and they really should because they lose business. I can say from me because with Yale, you need to send the manufacturer a special application request, which is called the SPAR. Engineering then has to determine if it can be done, and if it can be done, what the cost is, or a list price. So I don't like to wait a week to find out that we can do a mortise lock for a 2.5-inch thick door. It needs to be easy and fast. So all these parts are the variables. What also is a variable, a big variable, and I'm going to show you in the Schlage price list, is what's the hand of the door and where you are installing the lock in relationship to the edge of the door. So in this 4 1/4 thickness, are you putting it right at 2 1/8 in the center line? Or are you scooching it over here for some reason? Or are you scooching it over here? Are you biasing it biasing it towards one edge of the door or the other. All of that conspires because the length of everything needs to account for that, and the strike that's not shown.
Again, thank you for watching, and if you've enjoyed this video, please click thumbs up, please subscribe, and maybe even send the video to someone that you know. Thank you.